Hey YouTubers, it's been a while since I've posted anything on the channel here. Normally I try to focus on things that I'm doing up north at my cabin. It's been a heck of a winter up there this year. Lots of snow. Around Christmas time I think it was about 3 feet on the ground. I had planned to go up. I decided not to, only because of the cost to get my driveway plowed. And only spend a couple days up there. I just didn't think $300 to plow my driveway was worth a long weekend. So I didn't go. I'm going to be heading up there hopefully at the end of February, beginning of March, when things snow slows down a little bit. So what I've been working on here in Illinois basically is just a little photography project. I'm calling it 52 Weeks of 2020. I'm trying to take a large format photo once a week, something substantial, every week of 2020. This is week number 6. I've stuck to it. It's tough to do. The reason I kind of have decided to do it in this format is because it's difficult sometimes to make time to get out and shoot large format. It takes a long time. It's a long process. It's not as simple as a 35 millimeter. Go out, see something interesting, click, take a picture, develop the film, make a print. Large format requires some serious dedication to the art. Today it's about 10 degrees outside. It's supposed to be down to about 10 to 12 below tonight. It's very cold. We got about 4 inches of snow overnight. Real fluffy, powdery snow. And I saw this scene out in my front yard this morning, or out by my flower garden. I had some milkweed that had been growing there over the fall, and we left it there, kind of hoping that the monarchs would come in. They didn't. But the milkweed was still there. It was covered in snow. And I thought, boy, that would be a really cool photo if I could get an 8x10 camera set up and try to get a really nice up-close photo of the snow on the milkweed. Well, it's really windy out there. It's really cold. The photo I want to take is going to require probably shooting at somewhere around f/64, f/90. So it's going to be a very long exposure. And this milkweed is going to be moving all over the place in the wind, etc. So I thought, what the heck? It's really cold in my studio. It's where I am right now. Because it's a garage, it's quite cold out here. I didn't turn the heat on. I do have heat out here, but it's not on today. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take this milkweed over to my studio. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to simulate the snow. I'm going to go get some snow from outside. I'm going to drop it on there. I'm going to set up a camera. I can probably do the 2-hour exposure out here with no distractions or no disturbing. So let me flip the camera around here and I'll show you the setup. So basically what I've got here is I've got my milkweed set up on a little stool here with a couple of clamps, and I'm going to be shooting it against that black seamless back there. What I've got is my studio strobe set up with just the modeling light, and then I have a reflector on this side to just kind of even out the light on the other side. I've got my Birkin James 8x10 set up here. On my Zone 5 or Zone 6 wooden tripod that I picked up off of eBay. So this is totally a traditional setup, something you might use in the 50s or 60s or maybe even up into the 80s. But the camera was made in 1966. It's a year younger than me. The tripod was probably made somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s. And I've got a modern studio light set up. It's got a 300 millimeter Schneider lens on there. It's a pretty good lens, pretty sharp. I'm going to be using Ilford Delta 100 to shoot this. Preliminary light meter settings without figuring in reciprocity failure, it's going to be somewhere around 13 minutes, so at f/64. So by the time I figure the reciprocity failure, which is going to be obviously a lot, I'm thinking there's probably going to be a 2-hour plus exposure here. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on here and get some snow sprinkled on there and get everything focused up and everything set. And we'll continue on with our project. So I fixed the aspect ratio on the camera and turned it sideways. Duh. Anyhow, should be a little more pleasant to view on YouTube, I hope. Got my 19, probably late 60s, early 70s Pentex 1 degree spot meter. This thing is deadly accurate. Works like a champ, even though it's 45, going on 50 years old. I'll take some light readings on my scene, on my background, because I really would like the background to remain black if possible, or as close to black as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of readings here, and we'll do some calculations. Okay, so trying to read my scene, trying to read on my milkweed plant here. There's probably about 1 stop difference from the lightest to the darkest areas on the plants. The brightest area being the white seed pods down here. Once I dump some snow on there, I think it's going to get a little bit brighter. My background is about 2.5 stops below that. So that should remain pretty dark. If I put the main scene in zone 5, that's going to put the background somewhere around zone 2.5, maybe 2, depending on if I had tweaked the lights a little bit here. So I kind of like where I'm at with that. At f64, I did crank up the light a little bit. At f64, I'm at a half a second. Do some calculations and see where that puts us with the reciprocity failure. It's going to be a pretty substantial exposure. I may even stop down the lens a little bit more with a neutral density filter, give me a little more exposure time. I really want to maximize the depth of field, and I'm struggling with where I want to focus on this because this is not a flat scene. Right now I'm focused on one of the pods, but I think I may readjust this to try to get that a little bit straighter, a little bit on the same plane, so that I can maximize my depth of field by shooting at f64. So I'm going to try that right now, and then we'll get some snow in here and see if we can't make it look like it's been freshly snowed upon. All right, so I just checked the temperature in the shop here, and it is 13 degrees in here. It's very cold, so I'm trying to work kind of quick. I think I'm going to go grab a jacket here before I do too much more. But I grabbed some fresh powdery snow in a Cool Whip or something container, and I'm going to try to simulate a little snow falling on my milkweed here. Try to reproduce the scene that I saw this morning in my front yard. And there should be no danger of anything melting out here, I hope. I think we kind of got it. It was a little bit deeper, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get exactly like that. Looks like it just snowed in here, doesn't it? Beautiful. Okay, I'll take some more light meter readings because I think the snow is going to be a little bit brighter than the seed pods were. And we're getting close to making an exposure here, so stick around. So I'm going to go under the hood here, check my focus one last time before we get ready to take the exposure. I think I've got my lighting and everything exactly how I want it. I'm really concerned about this focus. I do have 2 sheets of film loaded in this holder, so I plan on doing 2 exposures, and I think I'm going to tweak the focus on the second one. Hopefully one of them I'm going to get the focus dead nuts where I've got everything in focus from the front to the back of the scene. I'm trying to focus on the front, and I'm hoping by stopping the camera down to f64 that I'm going to get that additional depth of field. The second one, I think I'm going to focus somewhere in the center of that zone, and hopefully the front and the back will end up being in focus, kind of a hyperfocal kind of thing. Unfortunately, I don't have a hyperfocal chart for this lens film size setup, so I'm kind of guessing, but I think we'll get it. I really want this to come out just tack sharp, so let's see what happens here. Okay, as I said, I was using this old Pentex 1 degree light meter, spot meter, and it has two settings. It has a high and a low. So if you're taking a reading under normal daylight conditions, that would fall under the high category. This is obviously a very low light scene, and I had miscalculated first, and I'm pushing the L button so I can get my lower meter reading, which I wish I could show you inside this thing. There's actually two scales. There's an upper scale and a lower scale, and then a needle that travels across it. Well, depending on whether or not you're pushing this L button, depends whether you're reading the upper or the lower scale. So I actually want to read the lower scale. So now that I've gotten everything set the way I want it, and this sounds a little more what I was expecting, at f64 ISO 100, with the setup I have, I'm looking at a 30-second exposure. Pretty substantial. And I know once I do the reciprocity failure calculation, it's going to be a really substantial exposure. And that's really what I was expecting. I was expecting an hour plus exposure on this scene, if not a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate that now, and then we'll get ready to take our exposure. Okay, so I've done all my calculations. I came out with like a 30-second exposure. I ran it through the calculator. It comes out to about 14 and a half minutes. I thought it would be a lot more than that, but 14 and a half minutes, reciprocity failure, my exposure, f64, ISO 100, just like the scene we just set up. I sprinkled a little bit more snow on there because I think the light is starting to melt it, even though it's cold in here and I had to put a jacket on. So I'm going to go ahead and get the film loaded up here, and we're going to make an exposure. Shooting this in a portrait configuration, and I've got my lens all set. So I'm going to double check f64. I got the shutter set to time. I'm going to double check that, and that works fine. So I've cocked my shutter, and I always cover up my bellows. This is an old camera. It has had some repairs done to the bellows. So just to prevent any chance of a light leak and ruining our exposure, I'm going to cover it up. We'll go ahead and pull the dark slide out. Set that up on the top here. Shut that down. And I have a timer back here I'm going to set. And we are going to go ahead and make an exposure. And I'll see you in about 15 minutes. All right, so our exposure's winding down. I've probably got about, I don't know, less than a minute here. And it's gonna ring. Anybody that's ever fooled around with black and white film, especially in a darkroom, developing film, etc., knows that black and white film loves overexposure. It hates underexposure and it loves overexposure. So if I go over a little bit, I actually set the timer for 15 minutes instead of 14 and a half. And it's probably going to go over a few more seconds here before I shut the exposure down. So it's kind of interesting during the exposure, the strobe, the light on there, my modeling light, is melting the snow. It started out nice and fluffy, and it's it's definitely melted. So I'm not sure how that's gonna look in the exposure. It might be kind of a neat effect. I'm not sure. It should be interesting to see how it turns out. I'm not real sure. Could be a first. It might be a little blurry because of the snow was actually melting a little bit. Oh, there goes our timer. So I'm going to shut the exposure down here and get set up for the second exposure. Probably going to do similar time. I'm going to try to bring in some fresh snow, and I might move the light back a little bit so hopefully it doesn't melt during the exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and shut her down here. That's it. Probably had about 15.5 minutes of exposure, even though with the reciprocity it calculated at 14.5. But like I said, anybody that's ever played around with black and white film will tell you that black and white film loves overexposure. So I just did what it does best. So I've got my dark slide in here. Flip my little stoppers over. And we'll go ahead and pull that film holder out. So we got one exposure done. We're going to set up for the other one here. Like I was saying in the beginning, large format photography is not a quick process, and if you want it done correctly, and this scene here, I have no movements on the camera, tilts, anything like that. So that can take even longer. I'm pretty much shooting straight on, and there's still a considerable amount of time involved in actually setting up the camera, getting everything just right, taking the meter readings, figuring out what zone you want certain parts of the scene in. So my hope is to take you through this entire process where we will develop the film, we'll look at it on the light table, and we'll make some prints as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up for the second exposure, and we'll be back soon. Okay, I'm back for exposure number 2. I've backed the light up, I've cranked it up as high as it'll go in the modeling light mode, and I've reapplied snow so that it hopefully, it was really melted bad. So what I've done is I've backed the light up. I'm going to shoot this one at f32, comes out to an 8-second exposure. With reciprocity, works out to 2 minutes. So I think I can get a good exposure without the snow melting too much, so I'm going to go ahead and get that started right now before it gets melting. And then we're going to develop some film. Okay, the exposure's in process here. I've got about a minute or so left, a little over a minute, I guess. I can still see the snow already melting. It's surprising how, I guess it's not nearly as cold in here as it is outside, because the snow outside is really, really powdery, really soft, fluffy. But I bring it in here and it starts to just kind of compress, and pretty soon it's just a glob of ice. Even though it's, it's under 20 degrees in here for sure. Hopefully we'll get a decent exposure. They said we went with f32. What I did was I tried to split my focus somewhere in the middle of the scene. I really want the front to be sharp. If it dropped off behind that, I guess I'd be okay with that. But I really want the snow and the front of the pods to be really sharp. I think it'll be a pretty awesome photo. So as soon as my timer goes off here, pretty quick, probably about 30 seconds, we're going to end this exposure. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to develop these. I've actually got 2 other sheets of 4x5 from last week's photo, which was the Madison, Wisconsin skyline at night. I was standing out on a frozen Lake Monona. It was very cold, very windy. I was going to set up and take some pictures of the setup and maybe even start my video then, but it was just too doggone cold to be messing around with the phone while I was trying to set up the camera. So I ran out there, set it up, focused, took a couple of quick exposures, and then got the heck out of there. And man, I'm telling you, it was freezing. All right, exposure 2 done. I'm going to take these down to the darkroom, I'm going to load them up, and we're going to develop them, see what the heck we get. Hopefully we got a couple of really nice exposures to look at here. All right, so here we are in the darkroom. I got the film all loaded up. I use a Bessler system. It's been around for a long time. These were originally created for developing color prints. It's a system that Bessler developed. It's pretty simple. It was pretty inexpensive compared to some of the Jobos and some of the other developing systems out there. I pick these up on eBay all the time. I bought the rotating thing. Works pretty well for me. It's not the hottest setup. It's not the greatest setup, but it does produce pretty good results. What I really like about it is it uses very, very small amount of chemical. A lot of times developing large format film, you could just use, an entire bottle of developer, developing 3 or 4 sheets, and I'm using 7 milliliters of developer and 93 milliliters of distilled water for 100 milliliters total, which will develop this 1 sheet of film. It'll also develop the 2 sheets of 4x5. I could develop 4 actually, but I've only got 2 to do. So it's Delta 100. I always like to run my Delta 100 with a 2-minute pre-soak. So I put warm water in there, and I just let it run for 2 minutes in the warm water. And I'm not exactly sure what it does. I've seen this a few other places, but it does something that loosens up the emulsion. It removes the top layer of whatever. It obviously doesn't affect the exposed part of the film. When you dump it out, it produces this really cool, deep emerald green color of the water, whatever it is you're washing off of the film. It only does this on the Delta 100, so there's something special with that particular film. Probably with 400 as well, but it's the deal for Delta. So I'm going to run it for about 2 minutes here. I've got about a minute left. It's going to sit here and it just does a rotation. Rotates back, rotates back. I've got it on a timer up here. Like I said, I put warm water in there, and it's just cycling over the top of the film, and it's loosening up that emulsion and getting it ready for development. So we got a few seconds left here, and then we're going to dump that out. So the shut, I got it on my timer, so it shuts it off. I'm going to move the camera over here so you can see the color of this stuff. It is really, I don't know, I think it's cool. You can see it. It's like this deep, deep emerald green color. I think it's pretty nice color myself, but whatever, no big deal. So that's our pre-soak. So I'm going to run this for 7.5 minutes with the developer, and this is Ilfasaw 3 diluted 1:14. 7.5 minutes is the catalog develop time. So I'm going to set my timer 7:30. I'm going to let that go. It'll stop when it's done. So we'll check back when we get all done fixing and washing. All right, the develop portion of the process is over. I'm going to dump out our developer here. I've already got pre-measured and ready to roll 100 milliliters of stop bath. So we're going to dump that in. And we'll give her 1 minute stop and let her go. All right, just finished washing. We developed, we stopped, we fixed. We just did about a 15-minute wash on the film. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that out now. We'll pull the negative out. I'm gonna drop it in some photo flow, which will help it to dry without streaks and stuff. It takes a long time for this film to dry. I do not have a film dryer, so we're going to have to let it sit and dry. We probably really won't get a chance to get a really good look on the light table until tomorrow morning with these. I'm gonna pull the first negative out here and let's see what we got. I'm really anxious. Oh, there it is. Wow. I don't know if you can see any of that or not. I don't know if there's enough light behind it. Looks pretty darn good to me. Not sure what that dark is up there. It's probably my, I guess that would be the top of my seamless. I don't know. Let's see. What I can see so far looks pretty darn good. This was exposure A. So I'm going to put that in the photo flow here. Then I'm going to get it drying. And then the next, I got the other film loaded up here. I've actually got my 4x5, 2 sheets of 4x5 from up in Madison last Saturday night. So I'm going to develop them. And then I'm going to go ahead and develop the other sheet of 8x10. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of shakes here and get that film good and wet with that photo flow, which will definitely keep the streaks off the film. I really like using that stuff. And I'm going to hang it up here in the light box. And we'll let that sucker dry. Let's see what we get. So I'm going to go ahead and take the camera down and let you see what we got going on here. I don't know if you know this or not, but my shop actually here is, this is a screen printing shop. And this is what I do. This is my day job. These are all screens. Screens have to be produced in a lot of the same way that you develop film. They're coated with a light-sensitive emulsion, although not nearly as sensitive as photographic film. But still, it's handled the same way under a safe light and stuff. This is a washout booth. So this is where we wash out the screens. I have a backlight on it so we can see. It also works great for developing or for drying film. So I've got the first negative in there. It's going to dry in there. It looks pretty decent. Looks like the background stayed pretty dark. Keep in mind this is a negative. And I'm going to go ahead and develop the 4x5 sheets, and we're going to continue from there. Well, I've got the last sheet of 8x10 developing right now. And I just pulled out the 4x5s, and they look pretty darn good. I'll try to hold this up here so if you can see that. So that's the Madison, Wisconsin skyline. I'll try to get all the light so you can maybe see from behind. Madison, Wisconsin skyline from out on frozen Lake Monona. I'm going to let these dry. I don't want to handle them too much. I'll stick them out here, let them dry overnight. And then tomorrow we will definitely be taking a look at all of this film on the light table, through a loop, whatever. But so far I'm pretty happy with the exposures I've gotten. Well, while this last sheet of 8x10 is developing, I think I'll give you a quick little rundown, a little tour of my darkroom here. It's certainly nothing special. It's odds and ends that I've picked up here and there. eBay, Craigslist, you name it, I've probably bought it from there. So I'm going to turn the camera around here and I'll give you a quick look at the darkroom here. So this is the view of my table. It's a homemade table that I created out of some half-inch coral plast and some 1x4s. Works pretty well. I got it drains right into a sink here, so I have water right there. Do not have hot water down here, so if I need hot water I have to bring it down. That's what I had in this tray here earlier. I had some hot water and I had my chemicals in there to keep them at temperature while we were developing. I got us 5 gallons of stop bath that I just mixed up just today. Another 5 gallons of fixer. Got some developers, safe light, some miscellaneous developing tanks, measuring units, some 8x10 trays. Got some big trays down here. I go up to 16 by 20 in the tray department. Some pretty cool posters, some pretty cool beer posters decorating the walls down here. Like I said, this is a washout booth we use for screen printing, but it also works well for film drying. That's racks with a whole bunch of screens on them. These are all screens that have been made for different customers, etc. And go over here to the other side. And I've got a little bit of a homemade light table here. We'll probably be taking a look at that tomorrow. Got a few prints hanging up, just some odds and ends prints that I've taken over the years, just things that didn't quite make it into a frame, but I kind of liked them, so I hung them up. And then finally I got my enlargers. I have two enlargers. Got a Bessler 45, so it can handle up to 4x5 negatives. I can make up to 16x20 prints the way it is set up now. You can also turn it into a projector where you could project onto a wall, and really it's unlimited how big a print you could make. And then I've got a Bessler 23C, medium format, 35 millimeter. Actually, this one will do both of those as well. I picked this one up at bought a Darkroom from a guy, and that enlarger was included. I kind of liked it, so I kept it. I really like the Bessler, the big Bessler, the 4x5, mainly because it's power head up and down. It's a really solid unit. And that noise is the timer going off on the fixer for our last 8x10 print. So we're going to tend to that right now. We got about 20 seconds left on the final wash of the last 8x10 negative. This will be exposure B, F32 for about 2 minutes. Kind of curious to see what the difference is between the two. About 3 seconds, 2, 1, and that should do it for the wash. Let's go ahead and get this into the photo flow and see what the first impressions are of the negative. Getting into the photo flow here. And I don't know if you can see this. I'll put this over here. It looks pretty darn good. I'm going to compare it to the other one. Actually, I think the other one might be a little bit better. We'll see. I noticed right here, I did get part of my my reflector in there, which is all right. We're going to crop this anyhow, so that's no big deal. But I'm going to hang it up in here and we'll take a look. Looking forward to tomorrow when we can get this in the get this on a light table and really get a good look at them with a loop, see just how sharp they are, etc. But so far, I'm real happy with the results. And we'll see what we can take a look at here. Get in there nice and close. That looks pretty good. I think this one just looks a little bit better. I don't. Well, I let the film dry overnight. Took them out this morning, sleeved them. Well, I'll tell you, that first exposure A, really turned out nice. Tack sharp front to back, good contrast. The only thing I wish I'd have done was get a little more light off of that background. I had about 2.5 stops lower on the background. If I'd have been about 3.5 to 4, about another stop or so, I think it would have been better. But since this is 8x10 film, and currently I do not have the ability to enlarge 8x10 film on one of my enlargers. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to scan these, and then we'll have to create basically a digital print, so it's kind of an analog to digital workflow. Where the 4x5s, I can make silver gelatin prints right here. That's my preferred method, and hopefully someday I will get to the point where I will have an enlarger that I can do 8x10 on. Currently I do not. So I should be able to tweak that a little bit, and even if I was making a gelatin print of this, I think I could make that background more black than it actually looks on the negative. We'll see. We'll try to scan these and get a good look at them. But like I said, the exposure A turned out the best. Exposure B is maybe a touch underexposed. I probably could have exposed it just a little bit longer. It's not quite as tack sharp as A. So I'm gonna let you take a look at these under the loop here, and you can decide for yourself. Then we'll scan them and we'll take a look at the finished products. The Madison Skyline, the 4x5s, turned out fantastic. I'm really looking forward to making prints with this one. I probably will scan it just so I can put it on the video here so you can kind of get a look at it. And maybe I'll scan all 6 of them up to this point so you can see the progress of the project up to this point. So hang on, let's take a look under the loop here. So looking through the loop here at the photo, at the negative, this is exposure A. You can really see that this is sharp front to back. There's some amazing detail in the little seed pods. The snow, I've still got some detail in there, so I think we should be good once we invert this. But basically, I'm just really happy with the way exposure A turned out. Even with the snow melting a little bit, I don't think it's I don't think it ruined the actual photo. So this is exposure B over here. It's even having a hard time focusing on it. It's just not quite as sharp as exposure A. It's not bad. I'll be interested to see what it looks like when I convert it after I scan. But look at exposure A. Man, that is just gorgeous detail. Just gorgeous. That you really aren't going to get with anything but 8x10 film. I mean, the resolution is just fantastic. And then this is my 4x5 from last week. This is the Madison, Wisconsin skyline. There's the Capitol right in the center of the frame. As I'm standing on frozen Lake Monona. So this is going to be a really nice looking print, I think. It's going to be really dark. There is some detail in there, so it's not completely dark, although the sky should be. So pretty nice little light stars there. This is going to be a good print. Looking forward to that. I'm going to scan this one as well so you can see it before I make a print of it. But I'm pretty impressed with this one as well. So overall, I'd say the project was a success. Got some great negatives to work with here. And this is really why I love large format photography. You just can't duplicate this with digital or a smaller format. Although I do like to shoot some 35mm as well. But you just cannot beat an 8x10 negative. Really looking forward to making prints with these. So I'm going to head on up and I'm going to scan these, and following the video here, I'll show you what the scans look like. And like I said, I think I'll throw in all 6 of them up to this point, and maybe we'll make this a series where we follow the whole project along throughout the year. So happy shooting. Get out there, shoot yourself some large format photos.